104.7 The Cave, KKLH, Marshfield, Springfield. Broadcasting from the Lorenz Plumbing, Heating, and Air Studios. Your home for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Touchdown! Kansas City!
It's Ned Talk, your live and local Chiefs pregame show. Hosted by Ned Reynolds, Joe Western, and the B-Team. Proud members of the Chiefs Radio Network on 104.7 The Cave.
Well, Ned, I'm getting to see a bunch of you lately. This Chiefs 10-day run is going to be a lot of time for us together, right?
Well, it depends on how you phrase that and what the definition of together is, but yes.
What are you hinting at right away?
I'm not hinting at a thing, but Santa Claus will be right here on Christmas Day.
That's right. We will be here live on Christmas Day because Ned said, you work. He's a regular Ebenezer Scrooge. That's right. Please, Mr. Reynolds, can I have another piece of coal? But we'll be here doing the Chiefs game on Christmas. And we're here today on a Saturday, which is kind of unusual. The Chiefs are playing a lot of football in a very short span of time, and that has to take a toll on a team.
You would certainly think so, and I do understand why there have been complaints. It isn't just the Chiefs. It's Houston and Baltimore and the Pittsburgh Steelers. They all have the same circumstance to follow, and it happens to be the way the calendar fell. But it's probably not going to be repeated here in the near future. But it's still, you made the point of taking a physical toll on the players. It does. You can't play that many games, in my opinion, in such a short time, especially where your rate of attrition is so significant as it is in the NFL.
Yeah, let's stop right there and talk about that for a second. By the way, I'm Joe Weston. That's Ned Reynolds. You recognize his voice, of course. Jake Gallette's with us today. Jake, how are you?
I'm good.
You're all decked out in your Mahomes jersey.
That's right.
I mistook you there for a minute. But you didn't. First of all, you've got a beard, and secondly, you didn't limp in. Okay, and Alex Scott's with us. He's all decked out in his Steelers gear.
Yeah, I thought we were here for the Steelers game.
Oh, please.
We were talking about today.
That's funny.
But let's talk about that for a minute, because the attrition has taken its toll on a player that is, I guess we could say, invaluable to the Kansas City Chiefs.
He's the one player who the Chiefs cannot afford to lose. Which is not to say that their backup wouldn't do a very good job at quarterback. He would, and they would be all right against a mediocre team. Against the good teams, probably not. But Patrick Mahomes has made a miraculous recovery. Evidently, the injury was not quite as severe as everyone thought it was going to be. Either that, or he's got a lot of...
He's superhuman, bud.
He may be.
He is, 100%.
No,
I thought the same thing, and of course, it's fourth down. They're up 21-7, and you're like, and he gets hurt. And of course, what's the first thing you want to do? Go rip Andy Reid's head off, right? Because why are we out there? Why is he in there fourth down? I like the fact, because on the flip side of that coin, we're always complaining about Andy not being and pushing, keeping the foot on the gas, always letting off when they have these leads. And so I appreciate that. But then, like, when a guy gets hurt, that's the face of the NFL, number one, the franchise kid of the Kansas City Chiefs, and now he's hurt. It came out as a mild high ankle sprain. And, of course, if we saw Patrick Mahomes 2 years ago when he did this with Jacksonville and still went through and won and made a Super Bowl and then got the Super Bowl, the first one or the second one, but the first of the repeat. He is a kid that it's amazing to me how quick he can recover from an injury. Now, remember the Patella game?
I remember it well.
Against Denver, and he's out for 2 or 3 games?
4 weeks.
4 weeks? Okay, so, and that, my daughter had that issue where the patella would go out of place, and it knocks a person out. But outside of that injury, he has been injury-prone, his ankles, and he's back at it, man. And everybody's like, just rest him. Houston's not the Houston team of last year, but why don't you rest him, let Carson Wentz get in there, throw some balls around, and we'll see what Andy does today.
And, Jake, that is precisely the way I think and still do, even with him playing and him in practice showing apparently close to full mobility. Why? You've got a pad there. You're playing Houston, and so you lose. Well, Buffalo's still 2 games back. They'd be one, assuming that they would win.
Yep.
You've got some measure
buffer.
of
We got a buffer. Yeah.
It is. It's a big buffer there. But why risk him? That's the question that I have. I'm sure nothing will happen looking at it as a Pollyanna, but you never can tell.
That's true.
Oh, well, wait a minute. You're sure nothing will happen? Let's go back over the last few weeks and what he's been sacked nearly 20 times over the last 4 weeks. To say that offensive line is porous would be to say that would be a favor to them. Because they're not stopping anybody at this point.
And he was not sacked one time last week. They moved some kids. What I saw last week, they moved Tooney over
there. Yeah,
they were making sure they double team Myles Garrett. And last week he didn't get sacked one time. And he actually, what was so weird was, and I don't know if did you watch the game too? Yeah, no. He chucked the ball 3 or 4 or 5 times. 10 yards over guys' heads. And they were long down passes, like long passes. But it was like he didn't realize how much time he had, and they gave him time last week.
Well, it's not that he didn't get sacked because he did. That's where he was injured on a sack. This is Mahomes we're talking about.
He threw the ball, though. He threw the ball.
Well,
it was no sacks on the day.
But he pitched it. He got hurt.
Yeah,
so
it's
a sack.
Attacked,
but the fact of the matter remains, no, he's so adept at escaping pressure. That's the key right there. Now, can Houston today apply that level of pressure? They might be able to. They've got a fair set of defensive ends who can come in, but probably not the way it has been against some of the other teams. If he can use that mobility and he's not affected at all by that sore ankle, he could have a very big day. Otherwise, well, the Houston Texans have not had great success sacking quarterbacks. In fact, they've been the victim of it themselves. Heck, the C.J. Stroud has been sacked, I think, 45 times or something like that this year. So their offensive line is having some difficulties. We may see a nothing game today.
A lot of quarterbacks getting hit. They don't have anybody at the caliber of Myles Garrett in Houston, but who hardly anybody does. But they've got Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson on the edges. They've got 2 guys that are pushing double-digit sacks. Now, below that, you know who you have to target in those 2 types of guys. And Mahomes is great at dodging pressure. I'm no longer going to take any kind of Mahomes ankle injury seriously until it's a literal break, because he just rolls along through it. Whether it's a high ankle sprain, what's going to happen? He's going to come out next week and he's going to be fine.
Oh, he was ready to go in.
Exactly, and he probably would have if it was a competitive game. So I truly think at this point, just exhale, sigh of relief. There was no injury designation on him on the practice report. Nope. And if you are the face of the NFL, the leader of your franchise, all the things he is, then you can't rest.
Still, Alec, I think they should rest him. I'm just period exclamation point.
If he wants to be everything it looks like he's trajecting that he can be, you can't sit out games like this.
Yeah,
not when you still do have something to play for. They have a buffer. They haven't secured anything other than the division, which is great. But Buffalo beat Detroit last week. I don't know if anyone saw that coming.
We did see that.
So
I didn't see that coming.
So they're staying on their heels. They do have something to play for. As pessimistic as I am about my team, Pittsburgh's not a nothing game. Houston can put up a fight. And then if you really don't want to go into that division game against Denver having it mean something in the final week of the season, because you just never know. They already almost got Kansas City other than a blocked field goal in the first time around. So you got to try every single game, and that starts today. So unless he physically couldn't do it, there's no world Mahomes wasn't going to be out there.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave. It's your local live sports talk show. Joe Westen, Jake Gillette, Alex Scott, and
you did it.
Joe Westen with that. Combined you 2 guys together. That's what I did today. We asked this question on Facebook a few weeks back because Mahomes has been banged up for probably 6 weeks now, something like that. He's been hurt. He's had ankle injuries throughout the season. How far do you, and we asked people online, do you sit him? And that was 6 weeks ago. And the overwhelming response is you can't stop him. He's got to play. He's the guy that's going to be in there. But how long do you let this roll if you're Andy Reid and the Chiefs? Because, yes, this game is important, but he is your nearly billion-dollar quarterback. He is the face of your franchise. He's the face of the NFL. You don't want him to be the guy that is backing him up, who's Carson Wentz, who looked like at one time he could be one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. He could be the face of the NFL, but he's not. He's the backup in Kansas City. How do the Chiefs navigate that world?
That is an unanswerable question. You had, back in the old days with the Chiefs, you had Lenny Dawson, and Dawson, you could ill afford to be without him, and yet he was in there, and he was not Patrick Mahomes by any stretch of the imagination. A totally different level of quarterback. He had to work out of the pocket, and Mahomes doesn't give a damn about pockets. He's running all over the place. Having said all that, you do have a risk. Now, the guy's physically he is something of a marvel because, as Alec just pointed out, he is able to escape any kind of very serious injury. But he also, the older he gets, that's going to be less and less and less a factor. Now, he's not very old. He's, 28 years old. But he is approaching that time now where one significant injury, for instance, I'll give you an example. That knee dislocation that he had, if that had happened now, that would have kept him out for a much longer time. It was 4 weeks, and they were able to slide it back. When you dislocate a knee like that, it's easy to be manipulated back. It's not easy for the people who had it happen to them. Yeah. But he was able to slough that off and get back and play, and the Chiefs didn't lose any significant ground there. But the older he gets, then the more he is sacked. Your body incrementally begins to lessen just every little bit, and you don't want that to really be a key factor in what you do.
Well, that's what made Tom Brady so good is he was never touched. That O-line they had did not let him. I mean, he got sacked, don't get me wrong. In fact, the Chiefs knocked him out for a whole year.
Broke his knee.
ACL. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But he's also very quick throwing the ball under 2 seconds, which was Tom Brady's normal passing range for getting that ball out. So Mahomes likes to hold the ball. We all talk about that. I think we all think he holds the ball a little bit longer, trying to make sure the plays getting created because the whole O-line is blowing up and he's got to run for his life, right? So I don't know. It's one of those deals where if he says he's good to go, I believe him. If we all in Andy Reid we trust, in Brett Veach we trust. Like these guys and they do have the clout to tell Patrick to go have a seat. And they will. I mean, you remember when he hurt himself in the Jacksonville game? It's all over that show, that the quarterback, where they're like, you're not going in. You need to go get x-rays right now. And he's like, I can play. And he threw his coat down, threw a little temper tantrum. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And so the guy is a baller. And I don't know if playing at that level, I'm sure the adrenaline is insanely, and the amount of what they can do back in the locker room real quick to get a guy back on the field, that stuff. But he is a warrior. And he does. He is the face. He is the billionaire, and he's the guy that's going to be out there doing what he wants to do.
And he takes it seriously. There are a lot of these guys that would go right to their head. It apparently hasn't with Mahomes.
No.
He's still the same team guy. They regard him very highly, and he knows it. And he's smart enough to know that.
And there's a difference in my mind between watching out for your player on game day, like that instance where the injury happens real time. It's like, we got to address this now, versus getting to see a full week of practice and getting it's like, hey, he says he's good. Medical staff says he's good. We got him, let him go out there. You were talking about Brady's play style versus Mahomes. Mahomes' play style is kind of conducive to getting your ankle rolled on because of how much he likes to run around. Brady would have, because of his, he didn't have that level of athleticism, but what they did have is a willingness just to build the system, and his ability, probably better than anyone who's ever played, to look at a defense pre-snap and go, I'm going there. He might miss a 50-yard touchdown because he knows the 15-yard in route's going to be wide open. Yeah. And Mahomes will hold it for that, want the big shot, make magic happen, and it is highlight reel material, and it's awesome. But because he's moving around so much and guys are diving at him, he's going to get rolled up. It happens, and like you said, Ned, he's only getting older, and eventually one of these high ankle sprains is going to turn into some sort of fracture or something to that nature. You hope not. But a lot of these guys, as a Steeler fan, I watch Ben Roethlisberger stand in the pocket and just bounce defenders off him until one day it didn't work like that anymore. His age catches up to him. So everyone has to adjust. Mahomes obviously has the talent to adjust, but that might be a hard lesson to learn down the road.
Flip side of the ball, Chiefs gets a big weapon back today. Hollywood Brown is in the lineup today. He will be in the starting lineup today. And now your two out guys, your two wide receivers, your far wide outs are Hollywood Brown and DeAndre Hopkins, and that's a pretty formidable pair right there.
But Mr. Brown also has not played all this year.
Yes, I know, and so, that's something that how much impact do you think he'll have?
Well, I think probably limited because I don't think they're going to have him in there all that much. He hasn't played. He doesn't have the rhythm down. You can get the rhythm in practice, but that's an altogether different scenario than it is playing in a game. They'll have him in there. Reed has already said he'll play, but it's simply to get his timing down. I don't think he'll be that much of a factor. Juju Smith-Schuster will be probably a key factor in the game, and Hopkins, who seems to be developing right into part of the Chiefs' offensive theories now, is a good athlete, and he's more than capable of playing well. So I think they'll have that. But, Brown will be in there a little bit.
Just think about that for a second. Let's just stop right here. If Rashee Rice is not hurt, if McCole Hardman is not hurt, just think about that stable that he has to throw to. I want to stop, too, and ask you guys, because we focus a lot on the Chiefs, but I've spent a lot of time watching other NFL teams, and it's painful watching the Chiefs. The Chiefs are a painful offensive team to watch. What do you think where's the key? Why is that?
Don't know. I do know that, or do perceive the fact that they are taking things a whole lot more conservatively than they have over the past several seasons. Mahomes is handing the ball off to his running. Their rushing attack never really used to be a substantial part of what they did on offense, but it is now, and it's a key part of it. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to accomplish a whole lot of yardage in there, but the fact that they are using the run more as an option as opposed to the pass, I think part of it, in my opinion, is that some of the opposing defenses have caught up with them and come up with a different formula in the defensive backfield. That is just a guess.
What do you think, Jake?
I do think it has a lot to do with the fact that this year there's a lot more game management. The running game. Pacheco was fantastic for the first game and a half. Then you bring in Kareem Hunt, and he's averaging over 5 yards a carry. And they never stopped. And I think this was the year that they had to change it up because people were figuring them out. And now look at everybody taking the everybody now that does the coin flip is deferring the ball. They figured out what the Chiefs were doing. It's not rocket science, but it's like we want the ball at the second half. Let them have it, We're at home. And so there's just people are figuring things out and being like, I never thought that's a novel idea. Let's do that. So they're figuring it out. And so this year I think they changed the whole game scheme. But the problem is the O-line. And that's the pain is watching our quarterback. Because I do too. I watch Josh Allen just sit back there and pick off play. I'm just like, why can't our guy have that time?
But my thing, and I think this goes back to something you said earlier, Jake, is that Josh Allen's going through his reads faster than Patrick Mahomes does. And I think that's part of maybe the mentality of the big play, the home run, when there may be things open in the 7 to 8 yard area. They ran a really effective screen pass in Sunday's game or Saturday's game or whatever day they played on. They ran a really effective screen pass where almost one whole side of the offensive line just went to the left.
Yeah, and Kareem Hunt just ran.
And they got the ball, and he was between three big guys and, picked up 15 yards in the play. And I, as a Chiefs fan, I want to see more of that.
You know what's crazy? You say that. Andy Reid, when he was with Philadelphia, had that screen pass to Deuce Staley, had that screen pass to Brian Westbrook, and they would run 50 yards. Because it is, like you said, it's all about the smoke and mirrors over here, and this guy over here, just a little dump, and let him go. And I don't know why Andy got away from that. And Mahomes is the guy who wants to chuck the ball, right? I mean, but you're also the guy playing, giving him what you're going to do, But yeah, the screen pass, man, is something I think they should use more.
Staple. He brought
100%.
Back when Jamal Charles was still around, it was just I root for a team that can't figure out the screen game to save their life. So it's frustrating. It's like agonizing to watch a team do it. It's like it just looks so easy. You just bite them in, and you just
it does, Alec, because there's several screens. There's the bubble screen where they set the one guy back, and then they have the two blockers. Then there's the straight screen where you have three and drop a guy back. It can puzzle a defense if you do it the right way.
No one arguably could do it better than Andy Reid. Draws off the screen.
Well, you know what used to frustrate me about watching the NFL was watching every team run the off tackle and see 2 yards.
Yeah.
And what frustrates me about the Chiefs is that guy that's way off to the side, usually a running back, and they throw that pass out there, and there's a safety or a corner that's read that completely, and that's the
3
Chiefs.
yards.
That's the Chiefs off tackle. Sometimes loss of 3 yards.
Yeah. Yep.
So when we come back, we'll talk about the Chiefs and the Texans. We're about 39 minutes away from the start of the Chiefs pregame show right here on 104.7 The Cave.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Chiefs Radio Network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Chiefs Radio Network.
We are not confused. We are exactly where we are supposed to be doing Ned Talk on a Saturday because the Chiefs have a game today and then they have a game on Wednesday, Christmas Day, and we'll be here for that. That should be a really good game. I think today's game will be a good game. Let's stop and talk about that for just a minute. The Chiefs and the Texans, I think we'll defer to Alec on this because you've probably seen the Texans play this year, know a little more about them than the rest of us do. What are we going to be seeing from that team today?
Yeah, it's a team last year that looked like it had everything trending upward, and while they're not having a bad year, it hasn't been quite the year the Houston Texans would have expected. Some of it with injury. They bring in Stephon Diggs from Buffalo. Stephon Diggs is out for the year with an injury. They've missed their wide receiver room has been hampered. They've missed Nico Collins, who's looking like an up-and-coming big receiver. He's been out with some injuries. The offensive line has not been able to keep C.J. Stroud upright, which has made C.J. Stroud look like he's maybe regressed a little bit compared to his rookie year.
Sophomore slump.
It's a thing for a reason, but I think the Texans is a franchise that are doing it right because they watched the rookie year that C.J. Stroud had, and they said, we're paying this guy nothing. We need to push the chips into the table now while this contract is low. So they trade for Danielle Hunter. They trade for Stephon Diggs, and they're trying to cash in. The Bengals went to a Super Bowl when Joe Burrow was on his rookie deal. Now he's getting paid big money, and that defense is atrocious. In Kansas City's been a team that through the draft has been able to survive these big paydays until the offensive line issue has started to creep up this year, and you're starting to see the fact that they don't have the financial flexibility that some of these teams do. So Houston's a good opponent, but a winnable game.
Alex Stroud is a very good quarterback,
Absolutely.
But he is also one-dimensional at the moment. He's just a second-year player out of Ohio State, and he can play, but he's been figured out by the other teams, or at least they figured out what Houston can't do, and that is protect him. What they have done, what the defenses now are doing, is putting a lot of pressure on Stroud. He's thrown for something like a little over 3,000 yards, but he's also had to rely a bit on his running game. He has Joe Mixon in the backfield, and that's certainly a capable individual. But the line has flustered him, has flustered Stroud, forced him out of his comfort zone and so forth, and that has affected what they do. But you also made a key point. They are in the playoffs. They're 8-5 on the year, and they can play.
9-5.
Is it 9-5 now?
They're leading a bad AFC South. Jacksonville's down, Tennessee's down, Indianapolis is scrappy, but not quite there. So it's their division to win. They probably will win. This is a team that's going to host a playoff game. So if you're Kansas City, this is not an opponent you just look at and go, we can roll through this one. There's a lot of talent on that roster. They can give anybody trouble. You look at some of their losses. They've lost to Detroit. The games like that. It's like games they've lost. I think they lost to Baltimore. It's like, a lot of people are going to lose games like that. That's not to say this is a bad team. It's just it hasn't been quite the year they've thought. They haven't looked like they've grown from last year. They look like they've taken a step back.
Yeah, I think expectations were so high for Houston. When you look at it, they're not having a bad season. I mean, they're 9-5. They are going to win the division, more than likely. There's a slight chance they'll lose the division, but they're all but clinched right now at this point. C.J. Stroud's been, as you said, but he's thrown for over 3,000 yards this year. Joe Mixon will be a 1,000-yard rusher on the season. Nico Collins should be a 1,000-yard receiver on the season. They've got some pieces. They've got some offensive weapons. So, Ned, I use the T word right here. Is this a trap game?
It would be, except that Houston has the capabilities. The trap game is like Cleveland last week. They don't have the capabilities, and then they rise up and beat you, which they obviously did not do. But Houston does have the capabilities. They're only 3.5-point dog going into this one at Arrowhead. And the thing about what the Texans can do. And the Chiefs have to be ready for this. The Chiefs have to really protect Mahomes in the backfield. They have to have everybody doing his assignment, because the Texans can put some pressure on you. That's what's happened to Stroud. They said, well, if it's happening to Stroud, then we can do the same thing in reverse. And you know what the story is with Mahomes this year. Sack on the box score, it says no times last week, but he was certainly flustered.
He got on his butt a couple of times. For sure.
He was flustered, and Stroud has been. So I think you'll see Houston try to put some pressure. In fact, put a whole lot of pressure on Mahomes and see how he reacts to that. Houston team, again, as Alec pointed out, they're not a bad ball club at all. Their defensive backfield is very good. Now, whether or not it's good to negate what Patrick Mahomes can do through the air with the stable of receivers that the Chiefs have, that remains to be seen. That's what we'll find out today. Weather conditions, probably pretty good. Probably going to be sunny, a little on the cold side. That's not good for Mahomes because that injured ankle needs to be kept loose, and heat does that, but they have the heat on the sidelines. But in terms of physical discomfort on the football field, I don't think that'll be a factor.
Yeah. No, it's going to be a good game. I do think that this should not be a trap game. I think you were right. Last week would have been the trap game. It's a short week because they played Sunday, now Saturday, and of course we know in 4 days they're playing on Christmas Day. And that is we've all been complaining about this 10-day stretch, especially with having a bye week. What was it, week 5 or 6? Mm-hmm. So these kids don't have any time off until the Super Bowl, honestly, unless they get first round bye, which is what we're hoping for. So I would love to see New England beat the Bills today. It's not going to happen. Chiefs win. They get the first round bye. It could wrap up. The Detroit Lions were supposed to take care of business last week. They didn't. Today's win would give Chiefs the first round, the number 1 seed, and Mahomes could rest the rest of the year. You know, there was a chance he wasn't going to play on the 25th because of how the chips were supposed to fall. But the Bills are a good team, and I'm telling you right now, they are powerful. And that Josh Allen, with no real talent around him, has made a good team. And so that's, I love our team, but man, there's other teams that have figured it out too, how to become good winners and good ball clubs, but they're going to have to come through Arrowhead.
Well, I think you saw what I think most people outside of our bubble, out of the Kansas City bubble, saw as the Super Bowl preview last week with Buffalo and Detroit. And Detroit got down early, but then came back, and and that's everything you want to see from an NFL game in the current format of the way the NFL is. It was high scoring. They put 83 points on the board or something like that.
49, 42, is that what it was?
The second highest scoring game since the Rams-Chiefs game about 3 or 4 years ago was 54-51. But yeah,
and you want to see that type of thing. You want to see good quarterbacks. You want to see good quarterback play. You want to see star power on the offensive side. You want to see some defense come up and make big plays. And I think that's you don't see that from the Chiefs this year. Now, I'm not saying they won't win the Super Bowl because I don't think you can count this team out for anything.
No.
But I think if you got maybe a sneak peek of what the Super Bowl may look like, because Detroit's awfully good, and so's Buffalo.
Oh, yeah.
Detroit
and
just
so
can't keep weathering injuries. That defense has 7 to 9 players on the injured reserve, and at least half of that were starters going into the year. Starting with Aiden Hutchinson straight at the top.
Yep.
The attrition rate in Detroit. Some big names in Kansas City have gone out, but are starting to come back. I don't think anyone's had worse injury luck, other than maybe San Francisco, than Detroit. But San Francisco's out of it, so Detroit weathering the storm. But that defense is looking suspect. They can score, but can they stop anybody?
Yeah.
DJ Humphries out today. He will not be playing. Leo Chanel is questionable. We'll try to get those starters and who's out before we get off the air coming up at 11 o'clock. And I just want to say really quickly, guys, we said goodbye to a Chief this week, and that's Clyde Edwards-Helaire, cut from the Chiefs.
Certainly not expected, but he would. In fact, he may have already signed with the New Orleans Saints. Has he signed?
He did.
In New Orleans.
Yep.
So he is right there at home. He played at LSU, so he's right there. And he's, as we mentioned last week, he's still capable. He's a fine player. But the fact is he doesn't fit into the Chiefs' scheme of things, so you have to use the waiver list. And more power to him, because I think he's probably more than capable of helping a lot of teams, and it'll be the Saints in this case.
Last night we had our first college football playoff game. We'll talk about that when we come back on Ned Talk.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Chiefs Radio Network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Chiefs Radio Network.
Chiefs pregame show is coming up in 18 minutes. Stick around for that. You might hear something interesting from the whole crew. Mitch Holtis, Dan Israel, Art Haynes, and everybody all together. Last night, Ned, before last night, there were 12 teams in the playoff picture. We wake up this morning, there's 11 teams in the playoff picture because the first game was last night.
Notre Dame beating Indiana 27-17. That puts Notre Dame against Georgia. I think that's the Sugar Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. It's a bowl game. And
You're never wrong, so I'll agree with that.
It's a quarterfinal. But I'll tell you what's really interesting in this whole weekend matchup coming up today is the pro football against the college football, right? And the ratings people really, this is the first time it's happened. The ratings people are just going absolutely nuts because they're going to look at this and compare the two of them. Which of these entities gets the better rating? You guys may not realize this, but it was 1961 when a federal law was signed by John Kennedy, was put into operation, in which the NFL could not play games during the regular season of college football. Oh. The regular season kept moving back, and Army and Navy is now December 14th. So after that, you can play. The NFL can play, which they are doing today. But wait, here come the college football playoffs, and they're going head-to-head. It's not regular season, so they can do that same thing. So you're seeing a altogether first-time situation.
Let me ask you a question. I mean, do you see this as the first real shot across the bow for college football to saying, hey, we're here to compete with you?
There's no question about it. It is, because these are bowl games that mean a lot. Southern Methodist, Penn State, which is going to kick off here in just a few minutes, and then a little bit later on, Clemson and Texas, and then you have Tennessee against Ohio State, against two pro football games, one of which has the team that almost everybody in America, I'm not blowing smoke for the Chiefs, but that's why they're on. That's why they're playing Christmas Day, because they're the most watched team against the Houston Ball Club, and then followed by the Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens on Christmas Day. Very popular teams. Hey, it all figured out in the mix. That's why it's happening.
One of the things we always complain about when we do this show, as far as college football goes, is it's the same old name, and if you've got one of those blue blood names, you seem to kind of get a pass in a lot of things. And, those teams are Ohio State, Alabama, and Notre Dame goes into that group. Notre Dame has a real opportunity to go far in the playoff picture because Georgia doesn't have their quarterback, Carson Beck.
Carson Beck is out, and you could see the injury happen when he got his arm, and his arm was hit as he was trying to throw the ball, but it was in such an awkward position that he's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not going to say, hey, I can get in there and play. He can't play. He's out. So Georgia, they're put at a bit of a deficiency here, but the Georgia football team is a lot from person to person, player to player, a whole lot better than Indiana. That'll be a significant football game.
It's a big difference between losing Carson Beck at halftime of the SEC championship game versus Texas versus having 3 weeks tear your backup quarterback for this matchup. It's going to look – I think the offense is going to look better, and to me this is just – in the past decade, it's been Notre Dame beats up on absolutely nobody over the course of the year. We talk about, is this the year? And then when they hit the big stage, they get trounced. Mm-hmm. And I think they're just set up for it again. I think Notre Dame's a good football team, but I think once they actually start hitting the meat grinder as the elite teams, which Georgia is one of, I think they're going to be in trouble. And that's what I would expect to happen next week.
Yeah, and if their defense shows up like it did last night, they had that team figured out. And Cignetti, the coach of Indiana, made a gruesome mistake. Before that game, he was out on game day, and he says, we're going to beat the S out of this team.
No, did you say that?
Oh, yeah. And why give somebody – this is like giving Patrick Mahomes something to just chew on for a week and be like, hey, you're the underdog, by the way. Why do that, right? And then Notre Dame had a very, very good game plan. The back shoulder pass that Indiana is known for, they just disrupted it. They averaged almost 5 yards a carry, 2 yards yesterday. I mean, that defense showed up. So, yes, Notre Dame could. And I think Ohio State or Georgia has to be smart and realize that this isn't this isn't a trap game. No, you can't look forward. You need to beat this team today, and then let's move on. But it's going to be an interesting game next weekend.
Cignetti may have been using some reverse psychology. Now, he may have been able to get away with that at James Madison. But when you get up into the big time and you're on national television, he was suggesting, and it's in reverse, he knew fully well that he wasn't going to be able to stay with this team, but give the team some confidence, give them some praise on national television, and maybe that can work in reverse. It didn't in this case. And again, we said this earlier, that score was deceptively close. It was not.
It was not that.
No, 27-17.
Though, if you were to place a bet at the beginning of the season that Indiana would be in the college football playoff, you probably got a pretty generous return on that, because that is not
normal
for the first time. First time up to 12 teams. I'm like, if you expand it to 50, maybe Indiana sneaks in the back door. But this was this was a better season than anyone would have anticipated. It'd be neat to see them build on it. I hope they can, because this was the feel-good story of the year for college football. And there's a couple of those. Arizona State and SMU are teams that you wouldn't. Arizona State was projected to be dead last in the Big 12, and they win it. And it's fun to see teams like that go on. But we talked about those big-name programs. They're big name for a reason. It's because they're almost always good. So looming behind your Indianas and your SMUs and your Arizona States are Ohio State, Oregon, and Georgia, and Texas. And there's you would think probably by the end of this thing it's going to be the big bullies that are still around.
What's the sexy game today? SMU, Penn State, Ohio State, Tennessee, Texas, Clemson.
Ohio State, Tennessee. I think I can foresee a Tennessee win at Ohio Stadium. That won't go over very well with the Ohio State fans, who are already angry with their coach, who has never beaten Michigan and has I can't say never, but one time?
1-4, 1-5. I mean, Ryan Day's coaching for his life today.
And then to coach in a very first ever playoff game in your home stadium and get beat, oh boy, that won't be very good at all.
I think it's like if Ohio State were to lose tonight, I don't know if they wait till midnight to fire.
Yeah, they may be out of there. Yeah,
like they won't even let him. They will go down to the sideline and say, "Give in your gun and badge. You're out of here right here and now in front of everybody."
Hey, he's urged a lot of people not beating Michigan.
It doesn't matter what you do. If you can't beat Michigan at Ohio State, and unless he brings a championship, that will save his job. But I personally think anything short of that, and Ryan Day's gone.
Really?
Anything.
Okay. See, I don't agree with that. I mean, to me, yes, you have that rival, but that's just one game a year. That doesn't make or break a season. And I guess, and this is maybe this is because I'm not a huge college football fan, but I guess those games mean so much to these people.
It means everything to those teams. Yep. So much so that the folks in Ohio do not even refer to the state by its name. It's that place up north that they play.
Take M's out of words the week they play Michigan. It's just I think it was how Harbaugh was having that problem before he left Michigan, because it's like he just can't beat Ohio State until he did, and then everything flipped. So as much success as Ohio State has had, they haven't won a championship. They haven't beat Michigan. That's a recipe for firing the coach.
When we come back, we'll give you our picks for today's game. It's Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Chiefs Radio Network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Chiefs Radio Network.
Just a few minutes, actually 5 minutes away from the start of the Chiefs pregame show. Mitch Oltis, Dane and Hughes, Dan Israel, Art Haynes, the whole crew together, talking about much of the same stuff that we've talked about, so they're just copying off us. They listen to this show, and then they just redo it.
Taking notes.
It's just they are. They're sitting there taking notes.
Chiefs good? Question mark.
Yeah. No, actually, they're a little more homer than we are if you've listened to the show. But it should be a good game today. Texans are, kind of under the radar for all of us here because they're not in that sexy group of NFL. So what do you think, Ned? What's your pick for today's game?
Probably a low-scoring game. All of them have been for Kansas City recently. 21-7 last week, and have they even dented the 30-point mark in recent games? I don't think so.
One time, didn't they, this season?
Anyway, I look for the Chiefs to win this one in a pretty good struggle. Houston will stay with them. I'm going to say the Chiefs win by a score of 20-17.
What do you think?
I think there's going to be 7 more points scored. 27-17 Chiefs.
Okay. What do you think, Alec?
Well, anytime the Steelers and Ravens get together, it's always a really good matchup. Wrong game. Wrong game. My bad. I do think it's going to be a good game today. I think Houston is, again, there's a lot of talent on that roster. I think this team is more than capable of putting up a fight. But everybody plays Kansas City low and slow because they know that's the way they stay in the game, and that's how Kansas City knows to win. So I'm going to go Kansas City, but I'm going to go 24-17. How about that? I'll bridge the gap between.
I feel like every week on the show we give Kansas City's offense a lot more credit than they probably deserve.
I said they would score 16 last week, and they scored 21, so I undersold them.
So I'll go with the low-scoring game here. I'm going to pick Kansas City 14-10.
Ooh, that's really
over Texans. Yeah, well, I mean, Ned's right. They haven't dented the 30-point mark. And last week was a laugher in the Chiefs book because they won 21-7
with 6 turnovers.
Defense, absolutely embarrassing. I said before the show, Jameis Winston was the most electric thing in football right now because you never know what you were going to get. You got the mess last week, and now he's not even starting for his team.
Right?
Yeah, he's probably done there.
He's getting benched. I mean, they're out of it. They got to see what they got in the backups. But Jameis will be waiting in the wings for some other team next year, and if you're lucky, it's your team because it's exciting. You never know what's going to happen.
Exactly.
And the anomaly is that he is the Cleveland Browns' single-game all-time record holder for passing, 497 yards.
Jameis giveth, Jameis taketh.
He had actually 688 total yards thrown with the 2 pick sixes.
And 2 pick sixes, that's right. How many quarterbacks can say that?
That's right.
Only 30 season in NFL history.
That's
30
right.
touchdowns, 30 picks. It is you can't look away. It's
So we got less than 2 minutes before the Chiefs take over here. So my question to you guys, really quickly, some talk this week of things that Travis Kelce said. Is this his last season with the Chiefs? Is he retiring?
Well, only he knows down deep whether or not he can continue to play. He takes a pretty good beating, and he hasn't had the year that he had, and he's noticeably a full step slower than he had been. He can still play, but does he really want to? Does he have it deep in his gut that he wants to continue out there? He's probably a pretty good talk show host and probably a pretty good commentator and can make some really good money doing that. And money's probably not an objective anyway.
He's done. He saw his brother retire. That killed him. I think internally it hurt. And so you could just tell with him on the road or him at playing, it's just not there anymore. And of course, now he's got love. So that changes the person too. And so I think this is it. I don't think if they win the Super Bowl, I have this small glimmer of hope that he'll come back to try for a four-peat. But I think he's done after this year.
Alec, quick.
I'm on the opposite end. I think if they win, he's definitely out because they do something no one's ever done before. And again, he looks a little slower, and life comes at you fast in the NFL. One day you got it, it very well could be the next day you got it.
Quick, yes or no answer. Is Noah Gray the true heir apparent?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, because he's the only one on the roster.
Oh, come on.
No heir apparent to Travis Kelce. There's been no one like him.
All right, we'll be back on Wednesday for Ned Talk, 10 o'clock Christmas Day. We're your gift to you. I know. We've got the receipt. You guys have a great day. Enjoy the game.
104.7 The Kid.